Thank you, Tim, for introducing me in your inimitable style. Anybody would think you were being sarcastic. There we go. I don't know how many people have seen, but while we've been involved in this conference today, the Sue Gray report has been published, or at least the bits of it that we're allowed to see at the moment. Now, the reason why I mention that is not because it's interesting, although it is, but it shows that when you're doing advocacy work, you never know what's going to come up and take all the news agenda away from you. God help anybody who's been in a trade association, who's been working on a plan for months and months and months and months to go and lobby MPs and make their point about whatever issue it might be today, because they're just not going to have any chance at all. So Tim asked me to talk a bit about advocacy. And advocacy, it can go on for as long as you like or as short as you like. It can really be as long as a piece of string. And so I guess I'd probably like to focus on three things. How do we as an organisation get to decide what we say? Because there's an infinite number of things you could talk about. So how do we actually decide the ones that we'll focus on? The second thing is, where do we undertake our advocacy? Where do we go? How do we actually physically do it? And then the third bit is going into more depth and detail on the how and giving some examples as to the sort of things that we've been able to do and how they've worked and how, perhaps in a couple of cases they haven't worked so well. So the Confederation of Paper Industries, we're a big organisation. We represent everything from trees to recycling bins and pretty much all points in between. So we've got a huge range of topics that we could talk about. And so the question is, how do we choose? Because we've only got a finite amount of time. How do we choose what we're going to talk about? And it's a governance issue. So we have a series of committee structures inside the Confederation of Paper Industries. So on the packaging side, we have a packaging technical committee that Andy there leads. We've also on the recycling side, we've got committees on recyclability certification, and we've got committees on the technical aspects of recyclability. And then on the energy side, we've got what we call our Process Issues Committee, which looks at energy and climate change and environmental law. So they are the three groups that are looking in real depth and detail at the technical issues and deciding where are the potential biggest pinch points for the organisations that we represent. But of course, everybody's got their ideas, and there are far more things coming out of those committees than we can actually deal with. So then within the governance of CPI, we have a series of councils, and those councils are people at managing director level. There's one or two CPI council members actually here in this meeting today, and they look at things at a strategic level. So they sift what comes up at a technical level, and they take that and say, well, okay, but this is the real priority in a business sense. This is the real priority in a business sense. So then we get that for packaging, we get that for recycling, we get that for the paper making side. And then we have a further overarching group called the CPI Overall Council, which has representation for all of the different parts of the organisation. And that then decides, well, which is more important in this particular aspect? Is it the energy thing we need to focus on, or is it the recycling thing we need to focus on? Is it the packaging side of thing, or the forestry side, or transport, or whatever it might be? So we have this sort of distillation process where we start with an enormous range of things that we could talk about, and we end up being able to focus on a relatively small number of priorities and give those absolutely proper attention as we're working on them. So we've ended up focusing inside CPI, most recently on Brexit and COVID, as perhaps you might imagine, but more fundamentally on energy and climate change, on recyclability, so what is it that makes something recyclable, on packaging, and in particular the promotion of recycling and why recycled packaging is important as opposed to some of the drives, particularly in the European Union, towards reuse and some of the challenges around reuse. And more recently we've started to put more and more time into skills. Now the recyclability one is interesting, and it's very interesting to follow Uno and Mark talking about recyclability. And I'd like to give you as an example just how we worked on the issue of recyclability. Because within our organisation, actually we've got three different constituencies. I've got the people over here who make paper, and they don't want anything other than fibre turning up inside their mill furnish. So they would like to see the definition of recyclable as being no contamination at all. And then I've got the people over here who are the people who make innovative packaging products. And they would quite like to be able to use paper in combination with other substrate materials in order to produce innovative packaging products that really meet customers' needs, but have things in them other than fibre. And then I have a group of people over here who are the group of people who are really interested in preserving paper's reputation. And they want paper to be recyclable, and they want it to be seen as being recyclable. And they're a bit concerned about the purists on the paper mill side, because if paper's only recyclable if it's 100% fibre, then that could be quite challenging given what's in the marketplace. But they're also a bit concerned about the people over here, because that's plastic laminates and all sorts that then causes further problems, and you get Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall type programmes where he's trying to take the laminate off a sandwich box and failing in public, and so on and so forth. So the job of CPI is to integrate those three views and to come up with a position that defends the interests of paper, defends the innovation that really is important in the packaging marketplace, but also defends the sustainability and the stability of the manufacturing process so that people actually get to make what needs to get made. So, I hope that's just a little bit of an illustration of how we end up deciding what we do. So the next question is where do we do it? And that sounds like an obvious thing, but actually there's lots and lots of different layers to how we engage with people in the advocacy work that we do. So, to start with, we write letters. I mean, it may sound desperately old-fashioned. I mean, people have been writing letters to ministers for 200 years, 250 years, but it still works. Ministers have entire correspondence departments that are actually devoted to receiving these letters and then doing something with them when they arrive in the government department. We produce reports. We try and develop the evidence base for what it is that we're doing, because ministers will be hearing all sorts of people tell them the black is white, that this is something that they ought to be doing. It might even be grey, actually, thinking about it, but no, black is white, this is what we want, this is why we should do it, and so on. And ministers want to see evidence. They want to see, why is it? Why should I take this decision as opposed to any one of 1,000 other decisions that I could take about the issue that I'm dealing with? We also do a lot of work through what are called all-party parliamentary groups. And I'd like to mention a couple of those. There's one for manufacturing and there's one for the packaging industry. We've worked very closely with both of those. We're members of both, the CPI, and actually through our relationships with other energy-intensive industry groups, we've sponsored some events at the manufacturing group. Now, these are really interesting groups and organisations to engage with, because what they do is they provide a bit of a neutral format where you can meet politicians and you can talk to them about the issues that you're raising. So if you want to have a conversation with a group of MPs from across the political divide, so not just one party, not just necessarily one geographical location or particular industry interest, then you can talk to a wide range of MPs in a particular subject matter, who've got an interest in a particular subject matter. And what you find is that you can build coalitions then inside Parliament, even of people who politically might be opposed to each other, but because they're prepared to engage in the topic that you've addressed to them, it makes it much, much easier then to build up a coalition and to start then collectively working with government officials and with ministers to push your ideas and hopefully influence the policy making process. A couple of other areas, social media. We do quite a lot of work on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and what you find is that the MP's researchers are all looking at Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn. And so if you want to get into what the MPs are actually thinking, going in through their researchers and through their researchers' social media feeds is a very, very good way of doing it. Now again, let me give you an example. Last Friday, we had the business minister, Lee Rowley. He had visited Northwood Tissue, which is a CPI member. They're a tissue mill. They're in Chesterfield. They just happen to be next door to his constituency, which was a good reason for him going there. And it's useful to sort of explain, how did we get that visit? Minister was only appointed towards the end of 2021, and we wrote to him. He wrote back. He was keen to be in contact with us. So we then had a Zoom meeting with him where we took a number of senior managers from within the industry, plus myself, plus colleagues from CPI, And we had a Zoom meeting with him, and we explored a variety of issues that we wanted to discuss with him. And at the end of that, we said, would you like to come and visit a paper mill? And he'd never been to one. He'd never actually had the chance to go to a paper mill at any point in his life and career. Lots of people haven't. And so it was a really, really good opportunity. We found one that was geographically close to him. We were able to put together the visit. We were able to work with the mill management to make sure that we put on a really interesting demonstration of the different processes and activities that we produce, to be a physical demonstration of what it is that we think is important. So things like energy and recycling, and how that actually works in the real world, rather than on the rather sort of dull pages of a report potentially. And as a result of that, we've built a relationship there. Now, what I would say is, advocacy work never has a beginning, nor does it ever have an end. It is an ongoing, iterative process of continuing to build up the relationships and work with government bodies until you can move things along a little bit in the direction that you want them to go in. Generally, you find that just as you've got a minister or an official properly educated in your department, they get moved on. They end up going somewhere else. So it's a constant battle to keep people moving. And that sort of comes along to the how. Because if ministers are moving a lot, then officials move less frequently. So part of the how of what we do is to talk to government officials a lot. We have weekly telephone meetings, or Teams meetings as they are now, with senior officials from the business department. And all of those are keeping up the flow of information, keeping up the engagement, so that those officials who are responsible for briefing their ministers really properly understand what it is that our issues are and what it is that they can do about them. And this relationship building is really at the core and the crux of everything we do in advocacy terms. And we're apolitical. So we'll talk to anybody who's in Parliament. We'll talk to anybody who's potentially going to be elected in Parliament. Labour, Conservative, SNP, Lib Dem, whoever. Because it's important, what we're interested in is in advocating for the issues, not necessarily in advocating for any particular political solution. So we're not advocating for a change of government, we're advocating for a change of policy. And that I think is quite an important thing to get across, because we're very much in the game of playing the ball, not the man, as it were. And again, let me give you a sort of another example, an example of way that we do advocacy in a way that isn't advocacy. So I'm not going to steal too much of Andy's thunder because he's up next after me, but we run a campaign at CPI called Beyond the Box. Now, Beyond the Box is advocacy work, because it's all about building the reputation of the corrugated industry, of its products, of the service it provides to society. So that when I go to government minister and I say, well, actually, I'd really like it if you could do this with EPR, or I'd really like it if you could do that with consistency of collections or whatever, and this is the benefit that it would give to the corrugated sector, and oh, look at the things that we do and the way that we support society, here's the Beyond the Box campaign information, this is the reason why it's in society's interest, then it makes it a much, much easier decision for the minister to take, to be able to support what it is that we want to do, as opposed to the people from the plastics industry, the glass industry, the metal industry, or any other industry for that matter, all of whom will be coming to the government trying to make their own points in their own way, and all using quite similar strategies and quite similar ways of working to the way that we use. So, two more little examples before I finish. The first is, and it is an example of how everything works together, back in March 2020, obviously we were entering into lockdown. A lot of industries were closing, being forced to close. And we spent days on the phone as a collective inside CPI, because Zoom and Teams hadn't really got going then. We were sort of using the telephone contacts that we had, talking to officials inside base, talking with ministers. Nadeem Zahawi, as then was, who was the minister for the business department, talking to the senior officials with responsibility for the COVID resilience program, explaining why it is that the paper supply chain, from paper manufacturing through conversion to packaging to recycling, needed to keep going. Because what would happen if we didn't? What would happen to all the goods that we're expecting to be packaged? What would happen to the supply of hygiene materials into the National Health Service? What would happen to waste collections if we didn't do recycling anymore? And they listened. And so, it's one of the, I think, probably the proudest moments of my career was the ability to engage with government and make sure that the vital importance of paper at that time was properly understood, so that all of the industry could continue to work safely throughout the pandemic period, as we have done up until now, and as I'm sure we will continue to do as the pandemic hopefully fades into memory, as it will do soon. So that's sort of one example of the sort of things that we got involved with. Another thing which I'd just like to close on is, I suppose, more by way of an invitation. People may have seen through our various communications as CPI, and I know that we've sent it to Tim and Ken and one or two others, that we're running an awards, the Paper Industry Gold Awards. And these are open for entry to anybody. So I'd invite any of the businesses here today, CPI member or not, to please go to the CPI website, look at the awards, find a category or categories that you might be interested in and enter. Now, why do I say that? I mean, I want entries. By the way, they are free. There's no money changing hands here in any of this at all. But actually, this is all about advocacy, because we want to be able to present the industry as innovative, as future-focused, as engaged with its employees, focused on the environment, on sustainability, recyclability, meeting net zero. And you've all got projects in your own companies that are driving towards that. So what we'd like to play as the role is a little bit of a sort of a funnel, to take that wide range of products and projects rather, and funnel them down so we can focus them onto all the important stakeholders to whom we'll send all the awards information to, so they can all see just how innovative the industry is, just how important the industry is to the functioning of British society. And so when they then come to talk to me about climate change or EPR or packaging recycling or whatever it might be, then I can show them. I can say, look at the things we do. This is why we need to have this particular change in this piece of legislation, this tweak to the Environment Act or whatever it might be. And that's why the advocacy that we do works, because it's a symbiosis between what the membership tell us, how we distill it, where we deliver that message, and what we're actually saying about how important the industry is. So on that, I'll say thank you very much. Thank you for listening. No slides. I do notice that I'm the only one on there not smiling, and I'm not quite sure what that's supposed to say about anybody at all, except Tim's choice of photograph. But thank you all very much, and very happy to answer questions. I don't know if there's time or not, Tom.
If there's a question, can anyone have a question, please? No, we are educated. Thank you very much.
I don't know about that. Thank you.